The massive crystal dome of the Centauri Prime Conference Hall stretched high above the assembled delegates, its transparent walls offering a view of 3 purple suns hanging in the alien sky. Ambassador Claire Thompson sat at the polished metal table, her hands folded carefully in front of her as she listened to yet another long speech about human inadequacy. The Galactic Council had been saying the same things for 6 months now, just with different words each time. Counselor Vexstar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, gestured dramatically as he spoke. His voice carried the tone of a teacher, explaining simple math to a slow child. The human species must understand that joining galactic society requires certain sacrifices. He said, his large black eyes fixed on Claire. Your people are young and lack the wisdom that comes with thousands of years of civilization. Claire kept her face blank, though inside she felt her patience wearing thin like old cloth. She had heard variations of this speech from every council member present. The crystalline Valdori representative had lectured about human emotional instability. The gas-dwelling Nethan delegate had questioned whether humans could even understand proper diplomatic protocol. Each species seemed to believe that being older automatically made them wiser. Captain John Hayes stood near the observation windows, his military uniform crisp and clean despite the long months of negotiations. He watched the proceedings with growing frustration. The United Earth Federation had sent their best diplomats and military advisors to these talks, hoping to end the border conflict with the Zephyrian Empire peacefully. Instead, they had walked into what felt like a cosmic intervention. The conflict itself had been relatively minor. Zephyrian raiders had attacked human mining operations in the Kepler sector, claiming the systems belonged to them by ancient right. Humans had responded with measured force, protecting their colonies while avoiding civilian targets. The fighting had lasted 3 years, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. When the Galactic Council offered to mediate, both sides had agreed, hoping for a fair resolution. That hope had died quickly. The Council's idea of mediation seemed to involve forcing humanity to accept blame for the entire conflict. Their proposed solution was simple in its arrogance. Humans would surrender 3 entire star systems, including 2 with established colonies. They would shut down their advanced shipyards and accept Galactic Council observers on all remaining human worlds. Most insulting of all, these observers would have the power to veto any human policy they deemed too aggressive. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, humanity's chief science advisor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Counselor Zethra began speaking. The insectoid being's translator rendered her clicking sounds into cold, mechanical words. Human military doctrine shows clear signs of excessive force, she stated. Your species responds to threats with unnecessary violence. This suggests a fundamental flaw in human thinking that must be corrected through proper guidance. The irony was not lost on anyone in the human delegation. These same council members had been quite happy to benefit from human military protection when the Korthik pirates had threatened shipping lanes near their borders. Human patrol fleets had kept the space routes safe for over a decade, asking for nothing in return except fair treatment in trade negotiations. Admiral Lisa Carter, watching from her position near the door, remembered those patrol missions well. She had commanded 3 different task forces in council space, working alongside alien crews to protect merchant vessels and research stations. The council species had seemed grateful then, praising human efficiency and dedication. Now they spoke as if that same military capability was some kind of mental illness. The Zephyrian representative, Ambassador Korthak, sat smugly at his own table. His reptilian features showed clear satisfaction as the council continued to dissect human character. He had started this conflict by authorizing raids on human colonies, yet somehow the peace talks had become entirely focused on human failings. The Council seemed to believe that being the newer species in galactic politics automatically made humans wrong. Claire had studied the histories of every species present. The Valdori had fought a genocidal war against the hegemony just 2 centuries ago. The Nethans had enslaved 3 entire species before developing what they called ethical evolution. Even the peaceful-seeming Altarians had a past filled with conquest and expansion. Yet somehow these same species now positioned themselves as moral authorities over humanity. Captain Hayes checked his communication device as another hour of lectures began. Reports from human space painted a different picture than the one being presented here. Human colonies were thriving, with new worlds being terraformed every year. Trade with neutral species was growing rapidly. Scientific research was advancing at record pace. The only problems humans faced came from these endless diplomatic demands and the raiders that the Council seemed unwilling to properly address. The breaking point came when Councillor Vexstar rose for his final statement of the day. His blue face carried an expression that might have been meant as fatherly concern, but came across as pure condescension. "We have given this matter great thought," he announced, spreading his forearms wide. "The Council has concluded that humanity is simply too aggressive to govern itself effectively. We propose a period of supervised development, with Council advisors overseeing all major human decisions for the next 50 years. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Claire could feel the tension radiating from every member of her delegation. 50 years of alien oversight. 50 years of being treated like children who could not be trusted with their own fate. The Council was not offering peace terms. They were demanding surrender. Claire stood slowly, her chair making a soft sound against the crystal floor. Every eye in the chamber turned to her, from the compound eyes of the insectoid delegates to the glowing orbs of the energy beings. She could feel the weight of human history on her shoulders, the hopes of billions of people across dozens of worlds. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the vast chamber. "The United Earth Federation has listened carefully to your proposals. We have considered your suggestions with the respect due to elder civilizations." She paused, letting the formal words settle before continuing. "However, we must decline your terms. Humanity did not travel to the stars to become a vassal state. We did not build new worlds to surrender them at the first sign of conflict. We will not accept supervision, oversight, or guidance from those who clearly do not understand what we have accomplished." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs and clicking sounds. No species had ever rejected the Council's mediation before. The very idea seemed to confuse them. Claire raised her hand for silence. "Effective immediately, the United Earth Federation withdraws from these negotiations. We thank you for your time, but we will handle our own affairs from this point forward." "Ambassador." Korthak's reptilian eyes widened with surprise and perhaps fear. Without Council backing, his raids would become much more difficult to justify. The other delegates looked equally stunned, as if Claire had just announced that humans were abandoning civilization itself, but Claire felt only relief as she gathered her papers and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the Council chamber buzzed with confused voices and urgent communications. They had expected submission, not defiance. They had prepared for negotiations, not rejection. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Captain Hayes allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had its own ideas about peace, justice, and civilization. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as streams of data flowed across her command screens. 48 hours had passed since Ambassador Thompson walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and now the largest peacetime evacuation in human history was beginning. Every human citizen, diplomat, trader, and military officer in Council space was coming home. The operation had a name that carried weight: Exodus Protocol. Military planners had spent months preparing for this possibility, though most had hoped it would never be needed. Now cargo ships, passenger liners, and military transports were moving through space lanes that humans had helped build and protect for over a decade. Captain Beth Turner piloted her freight hauler through the busy traffic around Valdori Prime, her ship loaded with human families and their belongings. The crystalline beings who lived on the planet watched from their transparent towers as humans packed their lives into cargo containers. Many of the Valdori looked confused, as if they could not understand why anyone would choose to leave there. Perfect crystal cities, on the surface, Dr. Amy Foster closed down the joint research facility where she had worked for 5 years. The laboratory had been studying new forms of energy that could benefit all galactic species, but the Council's demands had made continued cooperation impossible. She carefully packed the human research data while leaving behind the shared projects. Knowing that the other species would struggle to continue the work without human expertise, the Zephyrian border system saw the heaviest military movements as Admiral Danny Clark's task force provided security for the civilian evacuations. Zephyrian warships watched nervously as human battle cruisers and destroyers moved through their territory, but no one was foolish enough to interfere. The human fleet could have easily conquered any system they passed through, yet they did nothing but escort defenseless cargo ships to safety. In the Altarian system, Professor Chris Murphy finished dismantling the Cultural Exchange Center that had operated for 8 years. The scholarly Altarians had been among the few species to treat humans as equals, sharing knowledge freely and without condescension. Many of them came to say goodbye personally, their large eyes showing genuine sadness at the parting. "We do not understand why you must leave," said Scholar Valenor, his translator rendering his musical language into human words. "Your people have brought much wisdom to our discussions." Murphy paused in his packing to clasp the alien's delicate hand. "We leave because others demand we kneel," he replied. "Humans prefer to stand even if we must stand alone." The economic impact began immediately. Human shipping companies that had carried goods between distant worlds simply stopped operating. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for years suddenly had no cargo vessels to serve them. The Terran Stock Exchange implemented emergency protocols as human corporations dissolved partnerships and joint ventures across the galaxy. Commander Jake Miller oversaw the most shocking withdrawal of all, the evacuation of the Frontier Defense Network. For 12 years, human military bases had protected Council space from pirates, raiders, and hostile alien forces. The defense stations were marvels of human engineering, equipped with advanced sensors and powerful weapons that could track threats. Across multiple star systems, the Council species had grown so comfortable with this protection that they had barely maintained their own defense fleets. Why spend money on warships when humans were happy to do the job for free? Now those same humans were shutting down the sensors, powering down the weapons, and preparing to leave vast stretches of space completely undefended. "Sir, the Nethan representative is requesting an emergency meeting," reported Lieutenant Tony Blake from his communication station. Miller did not look up from his evacuation checklist. "Tell them all meetings should be directed through proper diplomatic channels," he replied. "We are no longer responsible for their security concerns." On the commercial station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Sam Rodriguez made his final transmission to the Galactic Medical Consortium. The data package contained the complete research on Zephyrian bone rot disease, including the cure that human scientists had developed just the week before. It was a gesture of goodwill that would save thousands of Zephyrian lives, even as their government prepared to claim human worlds by force. "Medical research should belong to everyone," Rodriguez told his human staff as they prepared to leave. "Politics should never interfere with healing." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The same species that had declared humans too aggressive to govern themselves were now watching those same humans share life-saving medicine freely while conducting the most organized and peaceful withdrawal in galactic history. Captain Helen Adams commanded the evacuation fleet in the core worlds, where human merchants and traders had built thriving businesses over many years. The aliens who had bought human goods and services now faced the reality of losing their most reliable suppliers. Human-made products were known throughout the galaxy for their quality and durability, while human services were prized for their efficiency and honesty. Patricia Wells, serving as the diplomatic liaison for the withdrawal, fielded hundreds of requests from alien governments begging humans to reconsider. The requests came from species who had voted to support the Council's demands just days before. Now they were discovering what they would lose when humans actually left. "The hegemony is offering a separate peace treaty," Wells reported to Admiral Carter during their daily briefing. They want to maintain trade relations regardless of what the Council decides. Carter considered this while studying the tactical displays that showed human forces streaming toward the Sol system. Forward the offer to Earth, she decided. But make it clear that any deal must respect human sovereignty completely. The military. Withdrawal proceeded with clockwork precision. Human patrol fleets that had maintained peace along major space routes for over a decade simply vanished overnight. The sophisticated early warning systems that had detected threats before they could reach civilized worlds went dark. Defense platforms that had stood guard over important trade routes powered down and fell silent. Ambassador Kevin Price, serving as the coordinator for the entire operation, watched from his command center as the last human transport cleared Council space. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and far more dangerous without the steady presence of human ships, bases, and personnel. As the final vessels crossed into the Sol exclusion zone, humanity sealed their borders completely. No communications would be answered, no ships would be allowed to pass, no trade would be conducted. The species that had demanded human submission would now learn to live without human protection. General Amy Foster reviewed the intelligence reports from automated monitoring stations that humans had left behind. Already there were signs of trouble. Pirate groups that had been quiet for years were beginning to move. Criminal organizations were testing the defenses of systems that had once been protected by human patrols. The Galactic Council had gotten exactly what they asked for: a galaxy without human interference. Soon they would discover whether that was really what they wanted. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared behind the invisible wall of the Sol exclusion zone, and the galaxy was learning what silence truly meant. Senator Patricia Wells sat in her office on Luna Station, reviewing intelligence. Reports that painted a picture of growing chaos beyond the human borders. The automated monitoring probes that humanity had left scattered throughout Council space were sending back data that would have been amusing if it were not so predictable. The first signs of trouble had appeared within weeks of the human withdrawal. The Korthic Syndicate, a loose alliance of pirate clans that had been kept in check by human patrols for over a decade, began testing the defenses of systems that had once been untouchable. Their first raid hit a Valdori trading post in the Epsilon sector, making off with rare crystals worth millions of credits. The crystalline beings filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Council, demanding immediate action. The Council's response had been pathetic. 3 outdated Nephin patrol ships arrived at the scene 2 weeks after the attack, their crews finding nothing but debris and empty space. The pirates had vanished into the asteroid fields where human sensors would have tracked them easily. But Council technology was decades behind human capabilities. Admiral Tony Blake reviewed the tactical reports from his position aboard the UES Vigilant, one of the ships monitoring the border from inside human space. The data showed pirate activity increasing by 400% along routes that human fleets had once protected. Trade convoys that had moved safely for years were now hiring expensive private security or simply avoiding the dangerous sectors entirely. The Zephyrian Empire is making territorial demands against the hegemony, reported Captain Danny Clark during the daily intelligence briefing. They claim 3 systems in the border region based on some ancient treaty from 500 years ago. Wells studied the star charts showing Zephyrian fleet movements. Without human naval power to worry about, the reptilian species was becoming bold in ways that would have been unthinkable just months before. They had learned during their border conflict with humanity that human ships were faster, better armed, and crewed by warriors who understood modern combat tactics. Now they were testing whether the other Council species would prove as formidable. The answer was becoming clear. The hegemony's response to Zephyrian demands consisted of strongly worded diplomatic protests and requests for Council mediation. Their battle fleet, such as it was, remained safely in their home systems while Zephyrian ships began occupying the disputed territories. The Council species had grown soft during their long peace, relying on human protection while letting their own military capabilities decay. Dr. Chris Murphy reported from the research stations in the outer solar system where human scientists were making breakthrough discoveries at a pace that would have been impossible under Council regulations. "We have successfully tested the new quantum communication array," he announced during a secure transmission to Earth. "Real-time communication across distances of up to 50 light-years is now possible." The technology represented a revolution in space warfare and exploration, but it had been banned by the Galactic Council as potentially destabilizing to established communication networks. Human researchers had been forced to abandon the project rather than face Council sanctions. Now, free from alien oversight, they were completing work that would give humanity advantages the Council could not even imagine. Fleet Admiral Jake Miller oversaw the completion of the most ambitious project in human history from his headquarters on Titan. Project Prometheus had been nothing more than theoretical designs when the peace talks began, but human isolation had provided the perfect opportunity to turn theory into reality. The construction yards hidden in the outer asteroid belts worked around the clock, building ships that incorporated every lesson learned from decades of space combat. Meanwhile, the human colonies that the Council had demanded be surrendered were thriving beyond all expectations. Captain Helen Adams reported from New Geneva, one of the worlds that the Zephyrians had claimed by ancient right, about the completion of the most advanced terraforming project ever attempted. "The atmospheric processors are exceeding all projections," she transmitted to Earth. "We will have a fully breathable atmosphere 6 months ahead of schedule." The world that alien bureaucrats had been willing to trade away in their negotiations was becoming a paradise that would support millions of human colonists. Advanced agricultural systems were producing food surpluses that could feed entire star systems, while mineral extraction operations were yielding resources that the Council species could only dream of accessing. Dr. Amy Foster's teams were revolutionizing medicine in ways that Council regulations had never permitted. Without alien oversight committees questioning every breakthrough as potentially dangerous, human researchers were developing treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. The cure for crystalline decay syndrome, a condition that killed thousands of Valdori each year, sat completed in human medical databases. But the information barrier worked both ways now. The intelligence reports showed that the Galactic Council was struggling with problems they had not faced in generations. Internal conflicts between member species were increasing as economic pressures mounted. The Nethans were demanding exclusive trading rights in several sectors to compensate for lost human commerce. The Valdori were refusing to share their crystal technology unless other species provided military protection for their mining operations. Lieutenant Beth Turner monitored communications from her listening post near Vault 359, translating the increasingly desperate transmissions from Council space. "The Altarian Republic is requesting emergency assistance," she reported. "They are reporting unknown ships massing near their outer colonies." The unknown ships turned out to be more Korthek pirates, but the Altarians had no way of knowing that their peaceful philosophy and complete lack of military forces made them perfect targets. The scholarly species that had spent centuries studying the mysteries of the universe was about to learn some harsh lessons about the reality of galactic politics. Admiral Lisa Carter reviewed the strategic situation from her flagship, now positioned to defend the approaches to Earth. Human space had become a fortress, with defensive installations and patrol fleets that could repel any conceivable attack. But the real strength of humanity's position lay not in their weapons, but in their independence. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Communications Officer Sam Rodriguez. "They are requesting immediate negotiations to address the deteriorating security situation." Carter allowed herself a small smile as she reviewed the formal language of the transmission. 6 months ago, the Council had lectured humanity about their aggressive nature and need for proper guidance. Now they were begging for help against threats they could not handle alone. "Send a standard response," Carter ordered. "The United Earth Federation acknowledges their transmission and reminds them that all diplomatic communications should be directed through proper channels when the current isolation period ends." The galaxy was learning what they had lost when they decided that. Humanity needed to be controlled rather than respected. Soon they would discover whether their pride was worth the price they were paying for it. The crisis began in the outer spiral with a burst of desperate transmissions that reached the Galactic Council chambers just as the Altarian homeworld started to burn. Captain Beth Turner sat at her monitoring station near Vault 359, watching the long-range sensor data with growing horror as the peaceful Altarian Republic faced complete destruction at the hands of the Korthic Syndicate. The attack had been planned with ruthless efficiency. 3 massive pirate fleets had emerged from the dark spaces between stars, their ships bristling with weapons stolen from a dozen different species over the years. The Altarians, a race of scholar-philosophers who had spent centuries studying the mysteries of the universe, had no military forces to speak of. Their few patrol craft were designed for scientific research, not combat. Scholar Prime Villanar's final transmission reached the Council just as orbital bombardment began destroying the great libraries that held thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. We call upon all civilized species for immediate assistance. His translated voice carried across the communication networks. The Korthic fleets are targeting our cultural centers and research facilities. They seek not just conquest, but the complete erasure of our civilization. Councillor Zareth of the Valdori attempted to rally a response from the crystalline towers of the council chambers. Emergency sessions were called, battle plans were discussed, and formal resolutions were passed condemning the attack. But when it came time to actually deploy military forces, the response was embarrassing in its weakness. The combined council fleet that assembled to rescue the Altarians consisted of 12 ships, most of them decades old and poorly maintained. Admiral Kethver of the Hegemony commanded the pathetic force from his flagship, a cruiser that had been impressive 50 years ago, but was now barely functional. His crew had not seen real combat in over 30 years. Dr. Amy Foster monitored the tactical situation from her research station in the outer solar system, watching through human sensor networks as the Council fleet approached the Altarian system. The pirates had nearly 100 ships, many of them equipped with weapons and shields that rivaled military-grade equipment. The outcome was predictable to anyone with basic knowledge of space warfare. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended in complete disaster for the Council forces. Admiral Kethver's flagship was destroyed in the opening minutes of combat, its outdated shields failing against concentrated pirate fire. The remaining Council ships fled after losing half their number, leaving the Altarians to face their fate alone. General Chris Murphy reviewed the intelligence reports from his command center on Luna, noting the tactical details that revealed just how far Council military capabilities had declined. Their ships used weapon systems that human forces had abandoned 20 years ago. Their shields were vulnerable to frequency modulation attacks that any competent enemy could exploit. Most damning of all, their crews had no experience with modern combat tactics. The slaughter on Altaria Prime continued for 3 days as pirate landing forces hunted down survivors in the ruins of the great cities. The Korthic Syndicate was not content with simple conquest. They wanted to make an example that would terrify other peaceful species into submission. Libraries were burned, research facilities were destroyed, and scholars were executed in the streets. President Helen Adams watched the reports from her office in Geneva, feeling the weight of every human decision since the withdrawal from the peace talks. The Altarians had been among the few species to treat humans as equals during the diplomatic negotiations. Scholar Villaner himself had privately expressed regret about the Council's treatment of humanity, though he had been unable to oppose the majority decision. The debate in the human government was brief but intense. Secretary of Defense Tony Blake argued for immediate intervention to save what remained of Altarian civilization. Secretary of State Patricia Wells countered that human isolation was a matter of principle that should not be abandoned lightly. The Joint Chiefs of Staff provided tactical assessments showing that human forces could easily defeat the pirate fleets, but at the cost of revealing military capabilities that were still secret. The decision came down to President Adams herself. Elected on a platform of human independence, but faced with the reality of genocide happening just beyond their borders. She authorized Operation Thunderbolt with a single condition: the intervention would be swift, decisive, and designed to send a clear message to anyone watching. Admiral Danny Clark received his orders aboard the UES Retribution, one of the new warships that incorporated technologies developed during the isolation period. His task force consisted of only 6 ships, but each one represented the cutting edge of human military engineering. Advanced stealth systems made them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. New weapon designs could penetrate any known shield. Technology. Most importantly, their crews had trained extensively in the tactics of modern space warfare. The task force materialized at the edge of the Altarian system exactly 72 hours after the pirate attack began. Captain Jake Miller coordinated the assault from his position aboard the UES Defiance, watching as human ships moved through space with a grace and precision that would have been impossible. Just 2 years earlier, the Korthic fleet commanders had grown confident after their easy victory over the Council forces. Their ships were spread throughout the system, some conducting orbital bombardment while others hunted for hidden Altarian settlements. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez monitored the engagement from the tactical center of the UES Vigilant, recording data that would later be studied by military academies throughout human space. The battle began with simultaneous strikes on the largest pirate vessels, human weapons cutting through their shields like paper through air. Enemy ships that had seemed formidable against Council forces exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The pirates tried to respond, but their weapons could not even penetrate the advanced shielding of the human warships. Their sensor systems could barely track targets that moved with impossible speed and agility. Within 14 minutes, the entire Korthic fleet had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. As quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished back into the darkness between stars. They left behind only wreckage and a simple message broadcast on all frequencies: the Altarian Republic is under the protection of the United Earth Federation. Any further aggression against this system will be met with appropriate force. Scholar Villana emerged from the ruins of his research center to find the skies clear of enemy ships. Rescue vessels began landing within hours, carrying supplies and medical aid from sources that the Council had never been able to mobilize. The message was clear to anyone with eyes to see: humanity had not withdrawn in weakness, but had returned stronger than anyone could have imagined. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the Altarian rescue, and the massive crystal chamber had never felt so small or fragile. Counselor Vexstar, the same being who had lectured humanity about their aggressive nature just 8 months before, stood at his speaking platform with hands that trembled slightly as he addressed the assembly. "We have witnessed something unprecedented," he began, his 4 arms gesturing with none of their former confidence. "A single human task force destroyed an entire pirate fleet in less than 15 minutes. Our intelligence reports suggest technologies that exceed our understanding by decades." The chamber erupted in frightened murmurs and clicking sounds as delegates processed what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to admit. Humanity had not retreated in defeat when they walked away from the peace talks. They had withdrawn to become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined possible. Admiral Danny Clark sat in his command chair aboard the UES Retribution, reviewing after-action reports from Operation Thunderbolt while his ships maintained their position. In Altarian space, the rescue mission had been a complete success from every measurable standpoint. Pirate casualties numbered in the tens of thousands, while human forces had suffered exactly 0 losses. More importantly, the intervention had demonstrated capabilities that would reshape galactic politics forever. Intelligence reports flooded into the council chambers from every corner of known space. Human colonies had been spotted beyond the galactic rim, in star systems that conventional wisdom claimed were uninhabitable. New shipyards were operating in locations that existing stellar cartography insisted were empty space. Most disturbing of all, energy signatures detected during the battle suggested weapon technologies that violated several fundamental laws of physics as the Council understood them. Captain Beth Turner transmitted her analysis from the Volf 359. listening post to Earth Command, noting the panic spreading through Council communication networks. They are finally beginning to understand what they pushed away, she reported. Trade route security has collapsed completely outside the major systems. 3 more species have requested emergency protection from pirate raids in the past 6 hours alone. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed so confident just weeks before, was now facing rebellion in the systems they had claimed from the hegemony. Without the threat of human intervention, several other species had begun making their own territorial demands. The reptilian military that had fought humans to a standstill for 3 years was discovering that other Council species were much easier targets. Dr. Chris Murphy completed his analysis of the power shifts occurring throughout Council space from his research facility on Titan. Economic collapse was accelerating as trade routes became too dangerous to use profitably. The advanced technologies that humans had shared freely for over a decade were no longer being maintained or upgraded. Most seriously, the scientific cooperation that had driven galactic research for generations had ended completely. President Helen Adams reviewed the flood of communication requests arriving at Earth from desperate alien governments. The messages ranged from formal diplomatic inquiries to barely concealed pleas for protection. Species that had supported the Council's demands for human submission were now offering favorable trade agreements, military alliances, and territorial concessions in exchange for renewed human cooperation. The most significant message came through official channels from the Galactic Council itself. Ambassador Kevin Price received the transmission in his office on Luna Station, reading the formal language that barely concealed the desperation behind every carefully chosen word. The Council was requesting immediate negotiations to discuss mutual security arrangements and revised diplomatic protocols. The language was important because it represented a complete reversal of the Council's previous position. 8 months earlier, they had demanded that humans accept their guidance and oversight. Now they were asking for negotiations between equals, using diplomatic terminology that acknowledged human sovereignty and independence. General Amy Foster briefed the president on the military situation from her headquarters in Colorado Springs. "Our strategic position is overwhelming," she reported. "Council forces combined could not challenge a single human battle group. Their technology gap has widened beyond any possibility of rapid closure. We estimate it would take them 50 years of intensive development to reach our current capabilities." The intelligence was sobering even for humans who had lived through the rapid advances of the isolation period. Military technologies that had seemed futuristic just 2 years before were now standard equipment on human warships. Industrial capacity that had taken the Council species centuries to develop had been exceeded by human colonies in less than a decade. Admiral Lisa Carter prepared for the most important diplomatic mission in human history as her flagship approached the neutral zone for the first official contact since the withdrawal. The Council had agreed to meet at the Altarian system, where Scholar Velaner would serve as mediator in gratitude for human intervention during the pirate attack. The human delegation that assembled on Altaria Prime was smaller but far more confident than the group that had walked out of the peace talks months before. Ambassador Price carried new instructions that reflected humanity's transformed position in galactic affairs. There would be no more discussions about human limitations or need for guidance. The species that had dismissed humans as aggressive newcomers would now negotiate with the galaxy's dominant military power. Counselor Vexstar entered the rebuilt conference chamber with an expression that would have been impossible during the previous negotiations. Gone was the condescending tone and superior attitude. In their place was something approaching respect mixed with carefully concealed fear. "The Galactic Council acknowledges the changed circumstances in our region of space," he began, reading from prepared remarks that had been debated for days. "We recognize that previous diplomatic protocols may have been inadequate for addressing the unique qualities of human civilization." President Adams responded via secure transmission from Earth, her words carried by Ambassador Price to the assembled delegates. "The United Earth Federation is prepared to consider renewed cooperation with Council species," the message stated. However, any future relationship must be based on mutual respect and equality of status. The negotiations that followed established the framework for what would become known as the Galactic Alliance. Human military forces would provide security for trade routes and peaceful species in exchange for guaranteed autonomy in human space. Council regulations would not apply to human colonies or research projects. Most importantly, humans would have equal representation in all future diplomatic decisions. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Species that had lectured humanity about proper behavior were now asking for human approval of their policy decisions. Military commanders, who had dismissed human tactics as overly aggressive, were requesting training from human officers. Scientists who had blocked human research as potentially dangerous were begging for access to human technological advances. The war against the Korthic Syndicate that followed was less a military campaign than a demonstration of human capabilities. Joint Human Council operations eliminated the pirate threat in 6 months, but the real victory had already been achieved. Humanity had earned respect not through submission or compromise, but through strength and independence. As Admiral Carter watched human and alien ships working together for the first time since the withdrawal, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating the species from Sol, and humanity had proven that sometimes the best way to gain respect was to walk away until others realized what they had lost.